Hello, welcome to the UK Gravel Collective Cycling Podcast. And on today's episode, I travel from the Midlands into Wales to have a chat with Chris Yeomans from Smithy Frame Works. And this is a sort of outside broadcast, and it's not studio quality recording, because it is from his workshop a lot of the time. So anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Let's go over to Wales. Welcome to the UK Gravel Collective podcast, and today's episode I'm with Chris Yeomans at Smithy Frame Works to have a chat about building bikes and the history of Smithy Frame Works. So hello Chris.
Hello there.
I suppose I better set the scene. We're in just over the border in Wales here?
Yes, just right on the border. The Offers Dyke runs through the garden.
Oh, right.
Although they have moved it.
So you get,
moved the border,
you get lots of walkers walking through your garden?
No.
So yeah, we're in, is this the nerve centre of Smithy Frame Works?
Nerve centre / home.
Yeah. So do you actually do your bike brazing building here, or?
I've got, so all the assembly and maintenance is done here. The actual frame building's done up at a workshop on a farm locally.
Right. So it is the sort of dream scenario of someone building bikes in a shed in the middle of nowhere almost.
Yes. In fact, during lockdown, I did actually build them here in the potting shed. And it turns out you can actually build a bike on a window frame, on a windowsill. So, yeah, which is... I could show you the potting shed later, but it's tiny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I built a few bikes in there.
That is lockdown. That is what do they call bespoke? Not rustic.
Rustic.
Well, what's the word I'm searching for?
No idea.
Artisan.
Yeah, very art. Yeah.
Yeah. Proper artisan.
Yes.
And you've also got a beard as well, so it's like perfect scenario. Have you got a leather apron?
I used to when I was blacksmithing.
Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. You mentioned blacksmithing. Yeah, I mean, you didn't wake up one morning and think, I'm going to go and build bikes. What's your history? What did you do before?
So I was a blacksmith for the best part of 30 years, and I was also a cyclist.
Yeah.
So I used to cycle to school from as soon as I was allowed out on the bike on my own. And then, so we've always cycled. And then a family came along and we cycled some more. And then kids started racing. And we met Gary from Curtis Bikes, who then started sponsoring our son.
Yeah.
And then later on our daughter as well. And because I was working with metal the whole time and building all sorts of...
You were a blacksmith, is that... I mean, I only know blacksmithing from what I've seen on the telly, so basically horseshoes, wrought iron gates. I mean, that's it. Well, maybe a sword on a historical programme.
Well, that's not... In many ways, that's not far from the truth, but there's a lot of stuff in between. Yeah. And I was doing that as well. I wasn't shoeing horses, but I was doing everything from mending the neighbour's tractor that he'd bust to doing staircases for
like ornate stuff.
Yeah, and really modern stuff as well. Yeah. So it was, but a very creative job that I was doing.
Yeah, rather than
I had a lot of stuff. I was selling a lot of stuff through a metalwork gallery in London. That was anything from a standard lamp to a candlestick to, I don't know, a mirror.
Yeah, yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
Have you always done? Did you always do that from?
I farmed out of school. Okay. I was farmed for about 12 years, I think, and then thought, "Oh, this is daft. I'm never going to make any money."
It's a hard life, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. Well, I was just a farm worker, so
yeah,
earning next to nothing.
Certainly
not enough.
I wouldn't imagine working with a forge and hitting things with big hammers is exactly non-strenuous.
Well, that's why I gave up. After 30 years, my body had given up.
Yeah.
Or was complaining too much.
Yeah.
And also having been self-employed all my life, this prospect of my pension actually paying anything out was not very brilliant. So I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something when I can't do the blacksmithing anymore. And I read a couple of articles in magazines about people who were building frames. Like I said, we'd been to see Gary. But I never really thought that it was something that was in my remit. I think, and that was really just through ignorance, I think, through the fact that I didn't have any access. Well, I didn't think I had any access to the tubes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't think about it. I think I was just stuck in my own little blacksmithing world.
Yeah.
Which was going fun.
It is strange to me because I'd have thought that you've got transferable skills, haven't you?
Well,
because you're used to working with metal. You know what the properties of metal, and whereas I wouldn't have a clue. I mean, the last time I brazed something together was at school, which was 40 years ago, and it was two rods of metal, and I got an O level in metalwork, and that's it. I've never used that skill since.
No. Well, that was partly why it seemed like a good step, because I had all the skill set, and it was going from something that making stuff that might weigh 400 kilos or 40 kilos
to
something that was going to weigh 2 kilos.
Yeah.
So
you sort of combined your hobby and your job.
Yeah, it's a bad idea often.
Yeah, I mean, people do say that.
It is a bit all-consuming. I mean, we do seem to breathe bikes, really.
Yeah.
Live and breathe them, but there can be
I'm in
worse,
that camp,
worse
but obviously
things.
I don't put them together.
Yeah.
So if I was a prospective customer, so people who hopefully listen to the podcast are either experienced cyclists who've been cycling for years, or they've just found the podcast and they know how to ride a bike, but they don't know anything about geometry or types of bike. So if a person who's got an existing bike now comes to you and says, I'd quite like to have a bespoke bike that was made for me, what's the process? I know you've got a website. Do they contact you through the website?
Yeah, that's the ideally. Send me an email.
She's what, Smithy Frames?
SmithyFrameworks.com. Yeah.
Okay. There's the advert.
They are SmithyFrameworks.com. So get in touch and just start a dialogue, really, of what it is you're after. Lots of people struggle to find a bike that really suits their needs.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many avenues the bike industry goes down and stops at, and people are afraid to merge them together, I think.
Yeah. So do you think you have to know a bit about bikes to come to you with an idea, or could you come with no clue about bikes and say, I want to do this sort of riding, I want the bike to sort of look like this? I mean, do you get people like that who have no experience of cycling, or are they all people who've...
Most people with no experience would probably go down the furniture barn and in town and buy something for 30 quid and then
instantly regret it.
Not enjoy.
But then again, they probably won't regret it because they don't know any different.
That's right. It's really difficult. One of the reasons that it feels like one of the reasons there's so many bikes in sheds that don't get used is because they've just bought something they didn't understand what they were buying, or they got no concept of how much nicer it could be, and much more enjoyable. For us, from what myself and Dawn, if you enjoy, we feel that if you enjoy riding your bike, you're going to ride it more, and if you ride it more, unfortunately, you just get addicted. And then it just costs you loads of money, but the more you ride it, the more you enjoy it, and then you can justify, I guess you can justify spending a bit more on it.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it, a nice bike is it's the same, not much difference to a year's membership at a golf club, and plenty of people consider spending that much money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's true. It does come across as an expensive hobby, but when you look at it like that, it's not really, is it? Because, and then what price enjoyment?
Well, that's right. Yeah, and it's not an expensive hobby really. Some of the parts are a bit eye-watering when you compare them to something that does the same job. That's a tiny bit lighter. Yeah. But
I think that's the same in all hobbies and sports, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if someone contacted you by email and said, interested in getting a bespoke bike built, what's the process then? I mean,
well, we normally talk about what sort of riding they have been doing, what they'd like to do, and when we've done that, we often then just have a meeting, maybe do a bike fit with them, make sure that they're going to be comfortable on the bike.
Yeah.
And because that's primarily why you buy a bespoke bike. It's a bit like buying a suit that's made to measure.
Yeah.
You wouldn't buy a suit that was made to measure that didn't fit you properly. So you can do that just by buying one off the peg.
Yeah.
So and if it fits you properly, then it's going to be comfortable. You're going to get to the end of the day feeling fine.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
And then you're going to be able to ride the next day as well, which is most of us can ride one day in a bit of discomfort.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right what you say about most of the bikes that, especially those that were bought in the middle of lockdown, when we thought the only thing you could do was go out on your bike.
Yeah.
Are now languishing in the shed, and I know it's because people are now sort of back to normal and they're doing other things, but a lot of it is they've ridden it a couple of times, absolutely hated it because either the bike didn't fit or it wasn't the right bike for what they wanted to do, and they've just put it to one side now because it's easier not to use it. So yeah, it's interesting. So what type of person comes to you?
Well, all age groups actually. Yeah, I've had people in their 20s. The bike I'm building at the moment, the woman's in her 60s. She's been riding a rally road bike that she bought over 30 years ago without looking at it, from a bike shop who she gave her measurements to. And she's a Swedish lady who is really tall. She's got really long legs. And they sold her a bike that was completely the wrong size. Right. It was way too big for it. Yeah. And way too long. It had a really long stem on it. And instantly it was the wrong size. So she did do a few things to it, shortened the stem and what have you. But she's ridden it around for 30 years and she's been all over Europe on it. And absolutely adores it. But it's just too big for her now. Yeah. She can't, she can't actually get her leg over it. So we're building her a frame at the moment. And she definitely didn't want to step through. She said that was a step too far down the route she didn't want to go. So we're going to use a dropper post so she can get her leg over it. So it's push the seat out of the way.
Another use that you don't always think about for a dropper post. It's not all about dropping into gnarly trails, is it?
No, definitely not. I mean, this is essentially a road bike.
Accessing the bike, yeah.
Yeah, a very, very light gravel/road bike or whatever you want to call it. And so we're just going to do it like that.
So the reason I've come over today is we're going to sort of go through that process with me as a guinea pig.
Yeah.
Because I know that, I mean, when we spoke before, you said you've done a lot of what you call flat bar gravel bikes.
If you need a label, that's the nearest I can come up with.
Yeah. But you haven't really done that many drop bar gravel bikes?
No, 3 or 4 really. I'm not sure why. Probably because there aren't many on the website. People.
Yeah. I mean, is it because you yourself use a flat bar or a riser bar? Or...
well, the first bike I built when I was started was a gravel bike. I felt I particularly wanted to build a drop bar bike so that I could remind myself what it was like. I hadn't ridden a drop handlebar bike since I was at school.
Yeah.
Everything else.
And no offence, there probably weren't any mountain bikes then. The same as me.
There was what we called racing bikes, and then there was
Yeah.
bikes that didn't have drop
Yeah.
bars.
I remember breaking 2 stems on my dad's. He had a BSA
Yeah.
bike, 3-speed, which had a drop bar, but I think they were like 500 mm wide. So I put tracker bikes came out then, so you could get these cow-worn bikes. So it was like 800 mm wide,
Yeah.
and I stuck these bars on it. I'm not sure how the actual brake cable stretched that far, but because of the
you
lever,
wouldn't have changed them, would you?
no. I just stuck them really inboard. But the leverage on the bars was that much, and they were like the swan neck stem,
Yeah.
and it just cracked it straight across the clamp on 2 of those. I was not the most popular, because my dad was using the bike to go to work on as well at the same time.
Yeah. No, so I built what was essentially a cyclocross bike, I suppose.
Yeah,
But because that gravel bikes hadn't really been coined at that point, or the phrase hadn't been. So
the marketing people haven't jumped in with 2 feet.
Yeah, so buying tyres for this thing was a nightmare, because I knew what I wanted, but when I built the frame and then found that I couldn't find any.
Yeah.
And I didn't really put enough tyre clearance in, because instantly I wanted fatter tyres in it.
Mm.
And I mainly wanted it like that because where we lived in Wales, even the tarmac roads were like a gravel path. Really.
Yeah.
You've got slime and mud and gravel in just all the breaking points.
Yeah.
And it can be quite scary, even.
Yeah, but just hearing you say that's making me excited. That's why I go out riding, because for that very reason, to go and ride on that stuff. Yeah. Carry on.
So I used that for a bit, and then I built Dawn a flat bar version, and she loved that, and I was never because of my lack of flexibility from all the blacksmithing, I wasn't using the drops. So I thought, well, I've got all this bit of handlebar. I've put all these really light components on, and I've got 50% of the handlebars that I'm never using.
Yeah. You almost just saw the drops off.
Yeah, well,
you've got flat
I
bar.
know.
Yeah.
Well, I've got some cow ones on one
Yeah.
of my bikes. So I just ended up trying out flat bar, what is now effectively a flat bar gravel bike, which I have noticed people have started making.
Yeah.
So
100%. It's
which is bonkers, really, because it's just a bicycle.
yeah.
It is,
Yeah. Well, I love the fact that it's not really diversified, because they're already there anyway.
Well,
But yeah, it's like it is a flat bar gravel bike, isn't it?
Yeah, but in many ways, people have been like the Rough Stuff Fellowship, who used to go off doing all the stuff that the gravelists do now.
Yeah, with a big box of sandwiches.
A big box of sandwiches, a Primus stove, a pack of Mac.
Yeah. And a pair of brogues.
Yeah, a pair of brogues, and basically a touring bike.
Yeah.
And they were doing it then. But they didn't call them gravel bikes. They were just bicycles.
Yeah.
The difference now is that you come home and the wheels are still straight.
Yeah.
Which is a bonus.
Yeah.
But they were really enjoying themselves, and I think that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
That
Well,
you enjoy what you're doing on your bike.
Yeah, that's what I love about it, because literally there aren't any rules. You just go for a ride, and you can go for an explore, and you haven't got to worry about average speeds and what you look like, what bike you're on, really. It's just go and have fun.
That's really important.
Yeah.
But we very much like to stop and smell the roses.
Yeah.
It's not very
it's all
it's
about
not very Strava, is it?
No, but it's all about the view, isn't it? And if you're on your own or with other people, it's just sharing that simple joy of going for a ride on your bike.
Yeah.
So here today I've brought a couple of my bikes over, because Chris contacted me and said he's interested in doing more drop bar, I'll say gravel bikes, but drop bar off-road bikes is probably the best. Well, not even off-road, is it? It's on all terrain.
All terrain, yeah.
So he said, what would be my ideas for that sort of bike? And I said at the time, it's sort of area specific, because where I live in the West Midlands in Worcestershire, it's totally different terrain to where we're stood now, in the borders of Wales, where I looked out your front door and there's a massive hill on the left hand side.
I have to cycle up that each morning.
Yeah, and well, I haven't got that round by me. I've just got like little bridleways and a lot of tarmac in between. So the bike I'd want for probably 90% of my riding would be different from the one that you want. So I suppose that's part of the design process when someone comes to see you. That's the question you ask: where you're going to be riding it.
Definitely. To put it sort of, to use an example, we had a mini John Cooper Works that we bought it just after we moved here.
It's classic,
absolutely
shape, or the BMW.
No, the BMW one, the new one, which we bought. I think it was just after lockdown, and it was the guy who sold it to us, the shop, the dealers. He said, "You do." This is after we'd agreed. He says, "You do realise, this is a guy in his 30s. He's looking up at this couple who are just approaching 60, and he's like, you do realise this is a missile." And we did, and it was great fun. It was absolutely fantastic. But the tyres on it were about an inch deep.
Yeah.
And round here, there's not a flat bit of road without a pothole in it.
Yeah, I noticed that on the way in.
Yeah. And after a year, I thought, I love this car, but it's got to go, because it was just, we were dreading going out on it, because every time you hit a pothole, you end up with a crook neck or something.
Yeah.
And it was a lovely bike. I'm sorry, a lovely car, and it looked fantastic, and it drove fantastic, but it wasn't really suitable.
Yeah.
I mean, we could even get two bikes inside it, and all the weekend luggage if we took them apart. We had a roof rack on the top, so it worked fine, but it wasn't really suitable. And I think that's the same with bikes. Lots of people buy a bike because it looks amazing. Yeah. Because it's got all the new kit on it. I mean, we all run 11 speed. I've not actually made a bike that's got 12 speed on yet. I'm not sure why, but for most of the riding that most of my customers do, are fine with 11 speed.
Yeah. I think that's just an arms race, isn't it?
Yeah.
Between the companies.
Well, I'd run single speed if I could, or even 3 speed. I'd go, if I could find somewhere, some middle ground.
Well, you can't sort of blame them, because to survive, they've got to sell more product, and the only way that they'll attract more people to it is to say this one's better than that one. Yeah. So people want the latest thing, don't
that's
they?
Right. Yeah. But I made a custom rack for a guy, and he was still running, and he's just last year, I think it was, went all around Peru and everywhere, bike packing and what have you. And he's running, I think it's either 9 or 10 speed, and he's got a thumb shifter on his handlebars, one of the old SIS ones.
Yeah.
So it's basically
it's like you got a friction option.
Well, I'm not sure it was a friction. Indexed. I think it was indexed, but it wasn't. It was somewhere. It definitely wasn't like a modern thumb shifter. I can't remember what type it was. And he was happy with that. He said, "Yeah, it's fine. It's very simple. Doesn't go wrong."
So someone's come to you. And they said they do X type of riding in the majority.
Yep.
What do you do then? I mean, do you say, this is my idea, and then you get their idea, and it's an amalgamation of it, and then you say, no, that's a stupid idea, or they say, I don't want that? Is there lots of back and forth, or?
That's definitely one way that it happens. On other occasions, they've come and told me exactly what they want, because they've seen it on my website.
Yeah.
And if we've got one here, they might come over and we'll go for a ride. Or a customer I had recently wanted a bike packing bike. Didn't know whether he wanted, flat bike, or like basically the one I've got on my website, he didn't know whether he wanted front suspension or not. So we had one of each. We went for a ride.
Okay. Oh,
And he said, no,
yeah.
I want that one.
Yeah. Oh, you're not getting that when you buy a bike from Alfred's, are you?
No. So, yeah, I mean, we went up for a ride up the woods, did a bit of climbing, bit through the single track.
Yeah.
Then down a gravel track.
And what did he go for in the end?
He went for the rigid, fully rigid, yeah.
So,
what was the question?
Well, it's just that like, people come to you with different ideas and you either say, yes, that's feasible or that's not feasible. So I suppose you get people who, like you say, the guy who's ridden around the world with his 9-speed, he'll want a totally different version of a bike to someone like me who's not going to be riding around the world, but
That's
going to
right.
be riding around the woods locally. So, you know, I don't want loads of rack mounts and places to put dynamos and stuff like that. So you can actually do that because each frame is individual to that person.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
What's the most unusual thing you've been asked for?
No, I haven't made anything particularly unusual. Oh, well, yeah. I am supposed to be meeting somebody about doing a velocipede. Is it velocipede?
Is that
So 3-wheeler.
Oh, okay.
Recumbent 3-wheeler.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
I'm supposed to be meeting them. He wants to build basically it's his version of a commuter car, electric. So 3-wheeler electric.
Oh,
One of
that's
those.
interesting.
Yeah, that should be quite good fun.
Yeah, that'll be
So
a design challenge, won't it?
Yes.
Is that so? 2 wheels at the front, steering.
I haven't got that far.
I was gonna say, that's not something you can buy off the shelf, is
flagged
it?
something up already that I need to do.
Yeah, that's not something you can buy off the shelf, is it?
No, a lot of them are homemade. A lot of them are fiberglass and wooden chassis.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of bespoke stuff. Like someone can email with a crazy idea, and you either put that straight into the bin and ignore it, or you think, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I had a guy who wanted a bike for commuting around London, but he wanted a hub gears on the back, belt drive. Most of the rest of it was fairly straightforward, but he wanted a sort of kid's bike look to it almost, with this sort of BMX-esque sort of feel to it. I mean, it looked like I suppose it looked like I'm not sure what it looked like.
And did you actually build that for it?
Yeah, I did. I mean, it wasn't like a BMX, but it had quite high rise bars. I think they were 60mm rise, and it had.
Is that on your website?
Yeah, I think it is actually.
Yeah, so check that out. I think I'm going to be checking that out.
Yeah,
later.
but he then said, well, I want it to look really rough and really bad, because I don't want it nicked, because he lived in London.
Yeah.
So I said, well, we'll have it nickel plated and then we'll patinate it so it looks really old and all the rest of it. And it looked amazing.
Yeah.
But he loves it, and he uses it for all his business meetings, so he turns up on his business meetings with it and stuff like that. And
that's really cool, isn't it? So are you exclusively steel and
yes,
brazing, I presume? Or
brazing. I do a bit of TIG welding.
Okay.
Yeah, a little bit. Mainly on if I'm doing a uni-crown fork.
So that's another thing that I've noticed on your website and your Instagram is that
what is that?
What would you call that? So
so they're
bear in mind this is a podcast, so we need to describe what this is.
It's during lockdown, you couldn't, if you built a frame during lockdown, that was relatively easy. Actually turning it into a bike was nigh on impossible.
Because
you couldn't buy anything. It was like, oh, these cassettes will be available in 2025 or something like that. And I'd finished a enduro bike, basically a front suspension hardtail, and it was ready to go. It had been delayed a bit for some of the components, and then they kept moving the goalposts for the front forks, but all the geometry was.
Is this like for a carbon fork, or
no? This was for a front. It was supposed to have a front suspension, 130mm travel fork on it. Yeah, and you can't just put a normal rigid fork on that. Yeah, because the front end would be like 6 inches lower.
Like a week into the first lockdown, I ordered a RockShox fork, and it was supposed to come in the month, and then it changed to the next year. and I still don't think they're in stock. In the end, I cancelled the order. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So, and he wanted to ride the bike, and he was happy to ride it with a rigid fork. So I built a rigid fork that was the same length as the.
That's suspension corrected.
Yeah, minus a bit for the sag, and that was about it.
Yeah.
So it's actually quite long.
Yeah. So I'll describe what I'm looking at. So it's a rigid fork. Obviously, it's got. Let's go for the traditional part first. It's got two legs, so one either side of the wheel.
Which are straight, apart from the fact they're wider at the bottom.
Got what I'll describe as a brake bridge, so sort of a brace near the top, and then it gets interesting. So instead of the fork crown, there are actually three separate crowns.
Yeah, they call them triplane forks. So they're called, I suppose they're called planes.
So I'll take a picture of this and I'll put it on the podcast website and my website, because it's really difficult to explain. But if you imagine a First World War aeroplane, the wings on that, like the Red Baron type thing.
That's it.
That's what the crown of the fork looks like, and it's all braced together, and it looks fantastic. And I think this is, I'll show you pictures of Chris's frames, and you can have a look on his website. But I think this sort of epitomises the attention to detail and the design and the intricacy of the work you do, just in one fork.
One fork.
Yeah, it's stunning, really.
Yeah.
Is it heavy?
Yeah. It's really heavy.
It's not that. It's not that heavy.
It's possibly there's no.
It's bolt through as well. So
it's not a lighter option. I wouldn't say it was a lighter option than the suspension fork.
Yeah.
But then that's not what it's built for. It was built as a replacement.
Yeah.
I would
built.
happily keep it
looking
myself.
at the width, this is built for a mountain bike.
That's Boost, yeah.
Yeah. So it's overbuilt for that as well.
Oh yeah, you can get there's 85 yard clearance there.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's what that is in a tooth. It's not a
in old money. I'll have to look at the tape measure and what was it, 85?
Yeah. So that's 2.5, 2 3/4 inch tire. You get 2.7 in there. Do they even do 2.7?
Yeah. 2.6. Well,
I know they do them that big, but it's like
So that's fab.
Yeah,
so that's the sort of way.
In a hurry to sell it. I'd actually quite happily. I think if I was going to build a frame to go with that, I would go with something I could have as a single speed. It would just be one of those crazy bikes. Maybe even a coaster brake.
Well, that's the beauty of your process, isn't it? Like, you can have whatever you want.
Well, that's the trouble, actually.
Yeah,
for me.
So this person has come to you. They've said, "I want this. I want that." You've said, "Yes, we can do that." How long then does it take? So you've measured them up for this frame, so you know it's going to fit them. So and then do you have to buy the tubes in specially for that, or are you cutting the tubes to length, or?
Oh, so the tubes come. Well, the tubes are butted, so yeah.
So you probably need to
which is what I was going to explain that. Yes. So a frame tube, when they refer to it as being butted, what that means is that the section of the tube nearest to it, where it joins the rest of the frame, will be thicker walled than the bit in between.
Okay.
Which means that you can have a lighter tube.
Right, and they're thicker on the ends.
So it's thicker on the ends where you weld it, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the simplest way of describing it.
Yeah.
If you were to have it thick all the way through, it'd obviously be heavier. If you had it thin all the way on its entire length, it wouldn't be strong enough at the ends.
Yeah, and would it flex more as well?
Yeah. But mainly it's the strength. But both. Yeah.
So do you buy that off the shelf?
Well, you do, effectively yes, but the butts want to be within a certain length. Mm-hmm. You don't want them so long that it's most of the tube anyway, and you don't want them too short because there's not enough strength there.
Yeah.
So the tubes come in different lengths, and you have to match that to the size of frame you're building. and then it's the diameters, choosing the right diameter for the right application.
Yeah.
And the right look.
Engineering wise, it's got to be strong enough, and aesthetically, the customer's got to love how it looks as well.
Yes, they have to.
So it's a bit of a balancing act.
It doesn't really matter what it looks like, but it really, really does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't kid yourself.
So if all your frame tubes are here, how long does it take you then to complete the frame?
Complete frame. You could, if it's not too complicated one, comfortably do it in a week.
Yeah.
With a fork as well.
Yeah.
It's something that's got more fiddly bits on it, if you like. Lots of rack mounts and mudguard mounts and bottle cage mounts and maybe a centric bottom bracket, stuff like that. That can take longer.
Yeah.
Because it just takes longer because they are one-offs. So you're basically building a prototype each time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a
So
crazy business model.
But in a jig or?
Yeah, we can go up and have a look at that later at the other workshop. Have a look at some tubes and stuff like that. Get a feel for.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Like.
And like you see, you do TIG welding and brazing.
Yeah.
Do you do one more than the other, or?
Yeah, most of the time I'm brazing.
Yeah. So a lot of your time then is actually filing the braze down.
I don't actually. When I started, because I'd come out of blacksmithing with a lot of repetitive strain injuries, I thought, well, I'm not going down that route again.
Yeah.
So I strive to make the braze joints as aesthetically pleasing as possible.
Yeah.
And then they just get a light cleaning to get the flux off. And then they go to the paint shop.
Yeah.
So you can see who made it. And
okay. Well, if we're going to go up to the workshop, let's talk about finishes and actual brazing when we do that.
Yeah. Okay.
So we've moved on now to Chris's workshop. Do you call it a workshop?
Yes.
And I'll just describe it. It's the noise you can hear in the background is a digger. It seems to be putting a trench in because of some flooding. So it's what you call the ideal shed. It's very wooden. There are lots of tools in here. There's a big jig which Chris uses. I can see a lathe, a pillar drill, oxyacetylene. Yes. And Chris is just getting some tubes down from
the tube shelf.
From the tube shelf. I can see a box with the word Reynolds written on it. Ironically, having just driven from Birmingham, I could have brought some with me. I don't know, do they still make them in Tysley?
Some of them, yeah.
Right. So how long have you had this workshop?
This, we put it together in 2020, between lockdowns.
Yeah.
So it was a tractor shed with a dirt floor and no insulation. It's now more like a bed sit than, than a tractor shed. It's all insulated and lots of natural light.
Yeah, it is very nice. I mean,
and a good view.
As workplaces go,
not too shabby.
I think the word idyllic is justified here. When you look out the window and it's just green fields.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's sort of your job, really, isn't it? But you must come here to relax as well.
I do. Part of the blacksmithing part of my life was probably a need to create things for me in metal anyway, and just to make nice things for people who wanted to spend money on nice things.
Yeah. So you've always been a creative person.
Yeah, and this definitely scratches the itch.
Yeah.
I think.
So you've got these tubes down.
Tell
me about tubes. I know we were talking about butting, and they all look, they're different diameters.
Yeah. So if we start let's start with a head tube. So I guess nowadays well, for a long while now. You've had all sorts of different variations. In my hands, I have a 44mm Bear Frame Works head tube.
Yeah.
Which is very nicely made. Which will take a...
I would say is the most versatile, because can you not fit any side fork in
so, you can easily use 1 1/8" in that with an internal bottom, and then external bottom you can go up to 1.5 inches.
Yeah, and I have to say, you can't. It's a podcast, so you can't smell anything. But I'm sniffing this this tube, and it just
smells of metal.
Yeah,
probably.
It does.
Yeah,
very.
It's not unusual for
very
metal to smell.
visceral experience. I imagine when you've got the heat going and you're brazing in here, it must smell.
Well, I get used to it, but I did remember when I was blacksmithing, and after a particularly strenuous day, the kids would moan at me because I smelled of metal.
Yeah,
It's just not quite sure what that means. So that's head tube. Then bottom brackets are literally just a piece of tube with a thread in them.
Yeah. Are you a fan of threaded?
I am.
Yeah.
I've not even thought about using press fit.
Good. Yeah. High five that.
There's nothing wrong with a threaded bottom bracket. Some people would even say there's nothing wrong with square taper.
No. Well,
and I've just fitted one of those, a square taper on.
I think it's
one of my
cost
bikes.
cutting exercise, wasn't it, for the bike industry to have press fit? Didn't have to pay to have threads cut into the stuff.
No, the customer has to pay with all the bike shop visits because it's squeaking or creaking. Yeah. So that's a very plain one. They do ones with lugs on them for traditional frames.
Yeah.
But this is just a plain tube, and it's 68 or 70 or 100 or whatever. Right. So then dropouts. We have got some front dropouts in stock, but only these cute little pair from Bear Frame Works, which are little hooded ones that take a 12mm axle. They might work quite well. Don't know yet. We haven't really talked about what fork legs you can have or what fork or anything, which is obviously something we need to do. What else have we got in here? And then there's just axles and stuff like that in there. So that's your bottom bracket. More back onto head tubes again. If you're not going to have a 1.5 inches, we have other options.
Yeah.
Just a straight tube, which the outside diameter is 36.6. About 1.2mm wall, I think. No, beg to differ. This one's 1.3.
Oh, 0.1.
Yeah, 0.1 makes a big difference on a big. That's so. Some main tubes, the difference is 0.1. The 853 Pro would be 0.4 of a mil in the middle.
Wow, that's quite thin, isn't it?
Yeah, and then the normal 853 probably about 0.5, depending on the size of the tube. So then we've got steers in here.
I mean, people say that riding a steel frame, you get that the feel of riding steel, the sort of springiness. Is that true, or is that down to the person who's built it and the geometry? If you were comparing it to, say,
the answer's yes.
An aluminium frame.
The answer's yes and yes. My experience of aluminium frames, I think the last one I had was an orange missile, or however you pronounced it.
Yeah.
And that was so unforgiving.
Yeah, that was
noisy.
Square tubing though,
that was
wasn't it?
Massive box section down tube.
Yeah.
That any little creak it acted like a megaphone.
Yeah.
That was very harsh. But I had a steel frame after that, but that was quite heavy and dead.
Yeah.
Whereas a nicely lightweight steel frame of the right wall thicknesses is like so plush to ride. I've got so used to it now.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at the comparison anymore. I probably wouldn't consider anything other than a steel frame for myself.
Yeah, and my single speed is steel, and I've ridden other steel bikes, and that one does feel different, even though it's supposedly the same material. But yeah, so again, that's why you come to someone like yourself. Can advise you on the different tubes and build that in, can't they?
Yeah,
If you're building a mass-produced steel frame in a factory, they don't really care. They just get the angles right and stick it in the box, don't they?
Well, yeah. If it's a mountain bike, they're going to assume you're going to be hucking off some 20-foot drop.
Yeah. I'm
So
not going to be doing that, Chris.
They're not going to be.
If I'm doing that, it's an accident.
It's all gone badly wrong.
Yeah.
So this is a box of. Oh, that's probably a bit loud, wasn't it?
Oh, that was the effects that we did in the studio afterwards.
Yeah. So that is in my hands. I have a 31.8 Columbus Life tube that I did start shaping the ends because I thought it might be long enough, but it wasn't. So I haven't really cut. Although I've started shaping the ends on that, I haven't really cut anything off. So which is why it's still in the box. But if you feel that.
Oh yeah, there's no weight to that at all, is there?
And if you look down the middle, you can just, that one's not very clean inside. If I can find a clean, you can just about see shadows where the tube gets thinner and thicker.
I can see, yeah, the ends are, yeah.
You can see better
Yeah.
on that one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
And they're holding the tube like a telescope out the window. And the two guys who are digging the ditch probably look going some sort of lunatic. Well, yeah, you can definitely see that the middle of the tube looks different to the end. So
yeah, and I can measure that with a dial gauge, tube gauge I've got, and mark out where the butts are, so that I don't cut them too short on one end.
Yeah.
Obviously it's both ends. So this one's marked, you see. So that one very short butt on the end.
yeah.
Only about 40 mil, and this one's.
And are these the same?
No, that's Columbus.
Okay, because you can feel the difference
Yeah.
in the weight. I know
So
that one's
that's 70,
slightly longer, but
That's 725. That one. That's 853. So that's a 35 mil diameter tube. And this one. So this one here is also. I think that's 853. Okay.
yeah,
So that's a smaller diameter.
yeah.
But the wall thickness on that, it's a strange tube, this one. It's 0.7 of a mil thick. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't actually buy this tube, I acquired it. But you feel the difference with that.
Oh yeah,
So that's probably 0.5,
yeah,
and that's 0.7.
yeah. So
And you
It's
think,
very
oh, it's only
noticeable
0.2 of a
difference.
mil.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's... I mean,
very
I'm
noticeable
not
difference.
sure where that's ever going to get used, that one. But
And this one doesn't look like it
no,
butted
no.
or.
And then this is...
Could me being a tube expert. This
Yeah.
one's not butted.
You could do,
Chris,
couldn't
that
you?
one's not butted.
Well, it may be a little bit. It might not be in the same place. So then this one here is a Reynolds bent tube that you would use when if you were using suspension, front suspension, because if you have a straight tube and you do a bar spin, you take the adjusters off the top of your.
Okay, yeah.
So you have to put that bend in to keep it out of the way. Not that I could do a bar spin to save my life, but it's called a crash when I do it.
Yeah,
So that's still quite light,
yeah.
but that's a big, thick mountain bike tube.
So you're picking tubes. Obviously, your down tubes taking more stress than say the top tube or the seat tube. So you'd use
seat tubes tends to be quite tough.
Right.
Sorry, tough. Quite substantial. They tend to be thicker. I haven't actually got them down here. Oh, grab the box. Oh, golly. So these are not the right size for your bike.
I can tell you that that's the top there, Chris.
Because it says top.
Someone's written top on it.
Yeah, that'd be me. Oh, yeah. So that one, I think, yes, that one's externally butted. So it's actually fatter at the top.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah,
Just about.
yeah. Just from there, sort of onwards.
Yeah. And then it'll be thicker. So if you feel, look at that, and then look at that. That's quite thick.
Yeah. So how do you go about getting around the wheel? So obviously the chain stays and the seat stays after the bottom bracket is probably narrower than the tyre clearance.
Oh yeah.
So are you bending those frames,
Oh right.
tubes, or?
So no. So the we've got. I think I'm completely out of chain stays.
I'm making poor Chris go up and down the stool onto the tube. So good workout for you.
Yeah, that's what was sold as a 29er seat stay. There you go. There's another one
Oh,
there.
you can see it tapers down much thinner one end than the other.
Yeah. And that would.
Like that.
Yeah, that goes
Yeah.
around your tyre.
Yeah, it's like an hourglass around the tyre.
And you can bend these as well. You can
Yeah, adjust them.
tweak them.
Yeah.
Yes, adjust. But they are pretty thin, so you have to be pretty careful.
Yeah.
And then the chainstays are much the same, but in terms of you can buy them in different angles.
Yeah, yeah.
Angles and bends and
Yeah.
double bends and triple bends and single bends. And
I think you might be doing a bit of that if you
No-
end
no-
up doing
no
that
bends.
trike.
yeah,
I mean, a bit of tube bending for that.
yeah. So
I see there's a really dusty fire extinguisher here.
yeah, don't.
So
Yeah,
how
well,
do
that's
you-
because I've never had a fire.
Well, good. Touch wood. But that's my point. The place is made of wood and you're playing with fire in here.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not worried that...
No, because you have to. I'm not sure I want to be quoted on this. It's quite difficult to set a building on fire.
That is not a challenge to anyone who's listening.
I know lots of people would argue with me, but if you,
Well, I suppose
If you-
apart from the place is made of wood, there's not that much combustible material. It's just metal and concrete.
that's
the rest
right,
of it.
yeah. As long as you don't do anything stupid.
So you've got a lot of tools. I presume these for reaming.
Well, most of
Different
these,
things.
yeah. So most of these are those are head tube reamers, and they face off at the same time.
So why would you need to face off
The
head
head
tube
tube.
and bottom?
So once
bracket?
you've brazed the head tube, the heat just tends to distort it a little bit.
Okay.
And also when you buy the head tube, it'll always be slightly undersized or oversized.
Yeah.
There's too much metal there.
Yeah. So
So
when
then
you come
allows
to
you
fit
to-
a headset, it's got to be the top and the bottom's
Yeah,
got to
so
be
they-
perpendicular.
Yeah, so they've got to be perpendicular, and obviously the cup's got to go in a nice tight fit.
Yeah.
But you don't want it that size before you braze it, because then when you have to ream it, you're gonna
Yeah.
be you're just gonna be missing bits and taking bits
Yeah,
off where you don't
yeah.
get too thin. So.
Yeah, and if your top and bottom headset or the bottom bracket side to side is misaligned, it's going to premature bearing wear,
Yeah, or just not be nice. Yeah.
which I think is the problem with the aforementioned press fit bottom bracket.
Yeah.
So not always in line either side, so
no.
that's why your bottom bracket lasts 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas a threaded one that's been faced at the ends is
Long
going
as
to
people-
last a
yeah.
lot longer.
And there's bike maintenance is the key, really.
Yeah,
If you any bottom bracket, if you don't take it out so often,
yeah,
they all fill up with water.
yeah.
I recently had to take one out of a bike that was probably it was made in the 1970s, I think.
Mm.
I basically melted it out.
It welded itself in.
It was,
Yeah.
it was not coming out.
We've talked about geometry, we've talked about brazing or TIG welding. When the bike's finished and the person's happy with that, how it is, what finishes can you have? I mean, are they powder coated, painted?
I don't powder coat at all.
Mm. Is there a reason for that?
I don't feel it's an appropriate coating for a bike.
Mm. Is that because it's not suited to what a bike goes through?
I don't like it because on a steel frame, because you tend to get a lot of stuff going on underneath the paint that you can't see.
Yeah.
And you can see this when you have a clear coat plastic coated, which was a bit of a thing a while back.
Yes. Oh, so you could see all the braces.
And you'd see all these little rust lines going on.
Yeah.
And they look great for a bit. But the problem with that is, if it's coloured, you can't see it's going on underneath. And the little tracking lines that aren't necessarily a problem. It's when the rust's deeper and it starts biting in.
Yeah.
And so your frame's disintegrating underneath your paintwork
Yeah.
without you knowing it. It seems to be a feature of powder coating. So I was using Cerakote for a while, which is really thin, which was great because you didn't have to mask anything.
Yeah.
All the fittings and threads and everything, you could even paint those as well, and they'd still work. It's just incredibly thin, incredibly
right. It's that
tough.
thin that it
Oh, yeah.
work on threads.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Something that was tight fit when you put it on was it wouldn't get any tighter.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous. But that was very expensive, and the company that I was using, that I was really happy with, moved on to doing something else and weren't doing bike frames anymore.
Right.
They had also managed to get the graphics in paint down to just a really nice finish.
Yeah.
So that was a bit disappointing, really. Having said that, it's £440 to me. Cost me £440 to have a frame.
Just for one frame. Wow.
Yeah. So
that's. I know you said it's expensive. That is expensive.
that's a lot of money. Yeah. Whereas a powder coating, you could probably get it done for
£50
well,
in some back door of a factory somewhere.
yeah, but then you've got so many bits that don't fit you,
Yeah.
particularly with the rear mech hangers that are integral in so many of the
Yeah.
dropouts we use.
Yeah, you've got to mask
It
everything.
just won't
up
fit.
Yeah.
They're a tight fit when beforehand. So I use a company called Lee Morgan Artworks, who are basically paint finish, so matte or gloss, and he'll paint all the graphics on.
What, hand paint?
No, airbrush.
Oh, wow. Well,
it does a great
that's the
job.
same thing to me.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like it's not a sticker. It's someone's actually doing it by
Yeah,
hand.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's all masked. It's computer. They cut out.
Yeah.
With a plot of a plotter and cut out the masking. Wow. Off. It's really good.
Yeah.
And that's a more favourable price.
Yeah.
And it's good finish. Lee likes to recommend using Smithy Frame, which is obviously the customer's choice.
Yeah. Well, anyone who watches the UK Gravel Collective YouTube channel,
Yes.
a little advert there, can watch me struggle to put Smithy Frame on one of my frames, and have to enlist the help of an expert at certain points.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does work. Yeah.
It does.
Especially if you're strapping bags and stuff,
Yeah.
because it only needs a little tiny bit of grit, and although it might not take the paint out, you'll be able to see
Yeah.
the marks.
Personally, having been, I find the first cut is always the deepest.
Yeah. You like a bit of patina on there. We're back to guitars and
I like
and ones that are
I
scratched to make them look
personally, I
old.
would
Relict, I think the word
yeah,
is.
well, there's a lot of that now, isn't there?
Yeah.
I would get the finish you're happy with, and then just ride the bike. And if you've got a steel frame, you can respray it.
Yeah.
And you can. My other bikes that I build, the vintage Flying Gate, they've been building. I get bikes from the 1940s, 1950s come in. No idea how many times they've been resprayed.
Mm.
But the fact that they're still being used, just ride your bike,
Yeah.
and then you can see the marks on it and think, well, that was when I did that.
Yeah.
I
Memories.
went off with a group of friends and
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think
it's up to the person.
while we're talking about finishes and graphics, I need to point out your head badge, the Smithy Frame Works head badge, which I still think is the best one that I've, well, if not ever seen. It is super.
Thank you.
And again, if you go via my website, I'll put a picture of the head badge. Yeah, it's just you could see that on the front of a 1930s, 1940s car as the grill.
There's the grill.
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
The radiator grill.
Yeah, yeah.
Really big.
Did you come up with that design yourself, or?
My daughter's partner did that for me.
Yeah, that's really good. And I'm actually wearing the
You've got the
t-shirt
t-shirt on,
today with that logo
works
on.
really well on audio.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned Flying Gate. That's your other project, isn't it?
Yes. How did that come apart?
Yeah.
About.
Yeah, I think you need to explain what a Flying Gate is.
Okay, Flying Gate. Zoom back to 1935, 34, which
No,
is
not quite that old.
which is
Yeah.
which is quite a while back. And there was a couple of brothers called the Baines brothers, who were trying to develop a track bike and time trial bike, road bike, that was stiffer and more responsive. And in those days, the option of putting bent seat tubing wasn't something they wanted to do.
Mm.
So they come up with the idea of having a really short seat tube and then putting the vertical tube in from the bottom bracket to the top tube.
And this sounds very complicated when you say it, but again, I'll put a picture of a flying gate frame, and if you look at that while we're talking about it, and it'll become immediately apparent what Chris is talking about. I mean, they do look unusual.
They do look unusual. They're not. It's a bit of a Marmite thing. I've actually got quite used to it now. So when I see a normal road bike, I think, oh, that's odd.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because there are a group of cyclists who don't really care what the bike is as long as it looks different to everyone else's, and that is certainly one that they should look at.
If you want to find out all the history, it's available on the website, which is tjcycles.co.uk. I have a little advert.
Yeah. From what you've said today, and I'm sure everyone who's listening, I know it's your inverted commas job, and you need to pay the bills, but you're doing it because you love it, really.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a passion thing, and your enthusiasm comes across for your own frames and for the flying gate, and I think that's the sort of thing that people like that, because they can come and talk to you about frames, what they want, and they're enthusiasts as well as you, and it's you just feed off each other. So yeah, although I don't think you're going to make a fortune of building frames, but that's not the point, really, is it?
No, and I've got past the point where I've got to pay a mortgage. So
Yeah.
and things like that. The key to what I'm doing really is keeping the overheads as low as possible.
Yeah.
So even at home and at work.
Well, what I'm trying to get across is that if anyone's if anyone's drilling a pipe in the middle of a field, they should come and help this bloke who's outside
In the rain, in the ditch.
Yeah, he's absolutely chucking it down, and he's waist deep in a hole.
It looks it, yeah. But he did dig it. He's dug his own.
I'll tell you what, I think I'd rather be stood here talking about bikes than stand in that hole. Anyway, if anyone is thinking about having a bespoke bike built, they should get in contact with you via smithyframeworks.com.
Yes. Or Chris at smithyframeworks.co.uk.
And even if it ends up not having a bike from you, or they have a flying gate from you, I think you're quite happy to chat to anyone about bikes. Although don't spam Chris. But no, it's been really interesting seeing the design process, the workshop, and I know that we're going to look at building a frame, sort of a UK gravel collective frame, so you can have a dabble with drop bar bikes as well as flat bar, and so if you listen to this, please like and subscribe, and you'll see the process going forward. So we'll try and do a YouTube video. Obviously you can't do that from the complete start to the finish because it'd be like 6 weeks long and nobody wants to watch that. But yeah, we'll keep you updated with photos on the UK Gravel Co Instagram channel, and obviously Chris will on his website as well. I'm starting to shout now because it's absolutely hammering it down on this wooden roof. But anyway, thanks Chris, thanks for inviting me over.
You're welcome.
And I hope it's been enjoyable and not too traumatic having to talk about yourself.
It's always traumatic.
But thanks very much.
Good. Thank you.